and our hope with classical education is that students are trained to not just inherit the past uncritically, but they engage with it thoughtfully. That's our hope.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and you've got the core four today, Paul, Tanya, and Martin. Has everybody been getting into some spring reading?
Spring is not the time for reading, but I'm getting it done.
Not on the farm.
No,
Yeah.
but I'm getting it done. I started, at book club, I suggested Flannery O'Connor, so we decided The Violent Bear It Away. So I just decided I'm not going to let this book hang over me for the next 2 months until Michelle schedules a book date. So I decided I was going to start reading it. And I mean, it's everything I expect from Flannery O'Connor. I can't remember if I may have read this like 10 or 15 years ago because I think I know what's going to happen.
Is that the one that you taught a cynical class? Was it The Violent Bear It Away?
Oh, yeah.
Martin had a cynical high school class once.
Your son was in there.
Yes, he was.
They were just, we were, reading Mere Christianity and Chesterton's Orthodoxy and Peter Kreif's Fundamentals of the Faith. And there was just like, nothing was getting to them. So I get out Flannery O'Connor's short story. What was the title of it? The one where the traveling Bible salesman steals the lady's wooden leg. Good country people. It was good country people, and it shocked them into consciousness.
Pedagogical tools for Martin.
They actually liked that one. It's a weird class.
Yes, they're still weird.
Right.
Yeah.
Tanya, how about you?
Oh, I'm reading The Country of the Pointed Firs by Sarah Orne Jewett, which I think you would love.
I have it.
You would hate. But have you read it?
No, but if Paul hates it, I think I want to read it.
Nothing happens in this book.
What?
It's literally just a young, I don't know how young woman. It's actually, I guess, Sarah Orne Jewett, the narrator, living for a summer in this little town in Maine on the coast and just, visits to people. And there is literally no action at all.
I can stomach a book like that if that's what I know what it's going to be. Like sometimes they will try to tell you that the book is going to have some kind of plot and try to make it sound interesting, and then it's one of those kinds of books where nothing's happening.
It's literally, but it's so interesting. I can't wait to get back to it every day.
Even though nothing happens.
It is not plot driven, but it is people driven, and it's beautifully written. And the reason I picked it up is I had this. About a month ago, I went and visited Wendell Berry, and for some reason we got on Huck Finn, and he said that he felt like Mark Twain failed with Huckleberry Finn when he brought in all the antics of Tom Sawyer and the fraudster people, I can't remember their names, that come in, and there's all this action happening. And he said what Mark Twain failed to do, Sarah Orne Jewett did in The Country of the Pointed Firs. Huh. And so I wanted to read it and see, because I'd recently read Huck Finn and Percival, the modern take on Huck Finn. And so I still don't know. I'm gonna write Wendell again to say, help me out here. Is it because he felt like Huckleberry Finn and Jim were just fine together? Just floating down that river without all of the distraction of all the unnecessary action. I don't know, because we didn't get that far. I couldn't talk to him about it because I hadn't read this.
Is it very episodic? Like every chapter kind of stands by itself?
It will stand by itself, yes, because it is visits with different people of different generations. Like one time she might visit with somebody that has been a fisherman all his life. And sometimes she might visit with a woman living totally by herself out on the edge. It's stories about people, but they're very simple lives.
See, I actually might enjoy that.
Okay.
It's because
Usually,
and also how it's for me. It's all about how it's billed to me, what my expectation
okay,
is.
well,
and I can
I've set the
enjoy a very
expectation.
slow.
There's no action.
Yeah. Okay.
But it is beautifully written. So, okay, you all read it and tell me what you think.
All right. Martin?
I was trying to remember what I was reading on the plane down to Florida this last week, and I can't remember what it was. I ended up going through. Tanya found a manuscript of some.
Oh yes,
a book that Cheryl and I were
So you
working
basically
on.
read your own work.
Yes, and it was beautiful. Gosh, it was good.
When everything else fails, just read Martin.
Yeah, I'm my favorite author.
And I'm not surprised about that.
So I read this magnificent essay on the Founding Fathers. I told you about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you get it in some sort of order for me?
I just need to kind of close up the end. It doesn't have a.
Well, I mean, I gave you a bunch of things.
Oh, I know, but the others there were duplicates in there. There were all kinds of other stuff. That really was the only thing that was salvageable from it.
Okay.
Yep.
Are you working on some articles for the magazine? Is that what it is?
Well, we were talking about what we were going to include in the pamphlet we were publishing for
the giveaway during the conference this summer.
Nice. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
And plus I was hoping, I know he wrote years ago for Cheryl, the first part of what was going to be their book on classical education, which was the history of classical education. And I remember reading it, and there was a lot of Cotton Mather and Puritan stuff in it.
That's the article.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was bigger than an article.
It was a big article.
Can't find it.
That's it. That's it. That's
That
what I'm
was
talking
it?
about. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's not a book. That's just a.
No, it's almost a
Chapter.
booklet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, but people may see it one day.
Well,
Like so many things.
At least we've rediscovered it.
we have.
Nice. Well, on to our episode today. We're going to answer a thoughtful listener's question that came to us at our podcast inbox, podcast@memoriapress.com. And she asked about a topic that most of us have probably heard discussed in recent years. So I'm going to read her email and we're going to dive in. This is from Marianne. She says, I recently heard a critique of classical education from an educator who warned to beware of this model because it is rooted in colonialism. I did not have a conversation with this person, so I'm not sure what was meant by colonialism. I'm guessing you may have encountered this critique, and I'm hoping you might address this in a future podcast. Thank you. Well, thank you, Marianne, because it was an excellent question. And it's kind of tricky because we can't ask the original educator what they meant by colonialism. And I'm glad that Marianne pointed that out, that she wasn't able to ask. But maybe it's helpful if we just first establish a working definition of how that word is typically understood so that we can use that as we move into the discussion.
Even though we may not be defining it like this educator's critique, but
Right.
at least then it'll be clear what we are talking
That's
about.
exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So I would think it's fair to say that when people use the word colonialism today, they're usually referring to one nation establishing control over another, or maybe another territory, and its people, and typically also its resources. And then when we are talking about classical education, I thought it would also be helpful to define that. And we would say that that's a tradition rooted in language and logic and culture from ancient Greece and Rome. So if we're using those two terms, colonialism and classical education, do you feel like those are fair and appropriate definitions of each term?
I would further clarify, at least when I think of colonialism, and we can figure this out as a group, whether we want to cast this out or not.
Mhm.
But I'm particularly thinking of the navigation era, right? Where you've got the Europeans that all of a sudden are on ships going out to other places that would not have otherwise had contact, and then trying to establish their homeland over there, right? Wherever that is.
And I'm thinking, I immediately go to Rome And there, they would
the empire?
conquer. Yes, they would conquer a people, and then they would kind of let them still keep their culture, but they were under the Roman Empire.
Well, see, that's why I would say that I would not actually call that colonialism, because you're not trying to establish your homeland over there.
Would you call it expansion?
I'd call that expansion.
Okay,
So
what about
expansion and colonialism are two different.
Imperialism.
So what about the British Empire?
So
would they be colonialists or expansionists?
I think what happens when the British come into America, very much colonialism, right?
We were a colony.
Yeah, we were very much colonies. Yeah, that's right. But I don't know, and I don't know enough about it, and maybe this is opening a can of worms with Martin, but I don't think that they treated India the same way they treated the U.S.
I don't know.
Because the amount of people that were already there, the towns that were already established,
right?
The culture that was already there, because over here you had the indigenous populations, but all the colonists were, not all of them, but most of the colonists were English.
And came over to establish the colony.
Right.
And it's not a colony in India. I think what they mean by the term colonialism here is imperialism. This expansion of empire. So that goes back to Assyria and then Babylon and all those. Basically, every major culture was
any strong
expansionist.
People group is expansionist.
That goes and conquers another country. And most of those countries, most of those empires don't bring with them a culture that they try to impose on the natives. They don't care. They're there for economic exploitation, or they're for for those kinds of things. Most of them don't bring with them a whole worldview, basically, which is what I think, and that's even true, I think, to a certain extent with the European colonialist, the European imperialism, which was happened over several hundred years, where they go to Africa and they subjugate various of the populations in Africa and other places in the world. And they're, a lot of the European powers were there purely for economic exploitation. Belgium, some of those, they were among the Dutch to a certain extent. Dutch colonized the East. So a lot of them are there primarily for economic reasons, not necessarily cultural ones, although they inevitably bring the culture with them.
They're not trying to turn that country into another version of themselves.
Right. And in a sense, that's one of the critiques of the West, of Western imperialism, is that they go in there and they try to impose their culture and their values on the locals, right? That's that issue, all kinds of issues with that.
Well, and there's a parallel with Rome, right? Like the whole struggle in Christ's time and with the Jews is that they actually felt like it was a religious issue for them to pay taxes to the Roman emperor.
Right.
But all the Roman emperor wanted was, y'all stay peaceful, give me my money, you can live the way you want to live. Compared to Alexander and Hellenism, right, which is the whole story of the Maccabees, that they were actually trying to change the culture and force them to be eating pork and to Hellenize, right? And that's why that era in Greece is actually very different, because there's this Hellenic push, there's a Greek push to make everybody like the Greeks, whereas before that it wasn't. They expanded a little bit, they pushed city-state to city-state, but when Alexander comes and it becomes very expansionist, like very imperialist, Alexander takes the strategy of, then we want to make them like us and not just we want to control them and extract their resources. So there are different things going on here when you talk about colonialism or expansion. Expansion, generally speaking, is not, in my term, when you use colonialism, it's we want to make them like us.
Okay.
Whereas expansion is we want to extract their resources.
Got it.
I'm glad we stopped to define it.
No. So then if we take the classical tradition or classical education as we defined it, an educational philosophy that comes from ancient Greece and Rome, then And part of its aim is forming citizens so that they live virtuously.
Mm-hmm.
Is it appropriate then to link the origins of classical education with what you just described?
Well, I think you need to go back to, when I'm thinking of sort of the Greek educational philosophy tradition,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Wow.
if I needed an adjective in there and I had a noun or something, forgive me.
Mm-hmm. So long, I'm not going to remember what it was.
I mean, in my mind, it's just going back to the Republic with Plato, right?
Okay.
And Plato's explicit goal there is not to raise up people to either go conquer other nations or go into another nation and how to transform them into us.
Mm-hmm.
But his real question is, how do we make our own little city state
Mm-hmm.
the best that it can be?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, he's trying to draw out a program of education that's going to raise children up to be good leaders in his little city.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's explicitly geared that direction. It's not geared towards let's go take other people's resources or let's go try to change other people into us.
Got it.
But isn't he also speaking universally? I mean, he's saying that there's these universal truths and the good, the true, and the beautiful. So later on, when Alexander goes out and conquers the world, this is post-Plato and post-Aristotle. Aristotle was Alexander's teacher. Doesn't he take that universal conception of the good, the true, and the beautiful? Doesn't he take that with him? And isn't that part of what is, I don't know,
What he was trying to convey to other cultures?
I mean, he's bringing Hellenism with. Isn't that part of Hellenism?
That's the big struggle between culture and politics, right?
Is that as it spreads, the values go with it?
Or that, but also sometimes the values get caught up in something that's merely an expression of the person's power or something, where what I'm saying is, I don't think Alexander was sending people into the towns that he conquered and saying, look, this is the best thing for you, and convincing them that this is going to be good for them. Like at that point, Alexander's like, hey, we're setting up a gymnasium. You should come to our gymnasium, right? Like, and if you didn't come to the gymnasium, you got killed.
I mean, to a certain extent, I think that's true. But he slept with a copy of Homer under his pillow. I mean, he was
wanted everybody to have that.
Educated by Aristotle.
But
obviously, he's bringing certain ideas and values with him, and I don't remember specifically reading about what he did as a result of that, but I've got to believe that was kind of part of, I mean, I assume he thought education was important. He brought educators with him.
Yeah, I think it just depends on how are we way off base here? I think we've turned this into a history lesson. It depends on what he wanted. I do think he valued classical education and all of Aristotle was his teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a part of who he was, but it's how he went in. And do you force it? Or do you just say, we're going to start some schools and I'm going to build a library? Everybody should read, rather than this is the mandate, and if you don't follow it, I'm going to kill you.
Well, he did build the Alexandrian Library.
Well, he did.
In Egypt. And that was a storehouse of, I'm sure, Western knowledge and things that they found in the East, because Greece and Rome were outward looking, and they wanted to know what other people knew, and they were eclectic in that regard.
And so to kind of get back to your question, Jess, I think with like the people thinking about education from all the writings we have from Greece and Rome are not doing it with the intention of saying we're going to go take other people's kids and train them into what we want them to be.
Mm-hmm. Some sort of indoctrination to wipe out a culture or a people group or
correct.
A way of being.
Correct. But there is this universal, or there is a push,
impulse,
an impulse, and also an understanding that what they're trying to build is universal, because human nature is universal. And so they're not just trying to say that this is appropriate. Like the Romans took the Greek model of education and said, this was the Romans imposing this on themselves. Mm-hmm. After they conquered the Greeks, they said, this is so good, we want this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sort of that kind of makes it more of this universal idea that this is applicable to all. And so when you're reading Quintilian or you're reading Cicero and people talking about how we're going to educate, they're not doing this because they want to subjugate others. They're doing this because they really think this is universally the best thing for all human beings.
Well, and just learning, Greek becomes the language for a while for many of those civilizations. And when you get down to New Testament times, you have Jews who are speaking Greek and who are reading Greek works. And so that automatically is transferred into that culture, is injected into that culture.
But so the critique, though, of colonialism being a negative thing is based on what?
Well, I think I would be willing to bet that the person asking the question, when they say colonialism, is speaking in terms of modern European colonialism, because that's kind of a buzzword among certain elements in our own culture. And if that's what they're saying, then that just doesn't make any historical sense. Because,
however, though, but wouldn't you say, as the West expanded, so did Western principles, and with it, Western this sort of educational philosophy?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if it is, they say, rooted in classical education is rooted in colonialism, and they're referring to European colonialism. That doesn't make any sense at all, because it existed for at least 2 millennia before that.
Historically, it wouldn't line up.
Yeah,
and I think the question then becomes, if you're living in a Western country, right? If you're in the United States, you're in Canada, you're in Europe somewhere, or South America, you're somewhere that has embraced the Western culture and ideas, and you say, we don't want a classical education because it's rooted in European colonialism. Well, any other form of education that you come up with in this Western culture is going to be springing out of Western values and mores. And so you're going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's in the air we breathe. It's in our genes. You can't get out of it.
I think
you're in it.
The problem now, and I think it's a recent problem, is that we're history revisionists, and for us to say we shouldn't study and historically a culture that was, say, misogynistic, means we can't study anything that's old. There was a reason George Eliot wrote under a male pseudonym. This isn't new. And slavery isn't new, and it's not. If we say we're not going to study anything that is rooted in those things, which we've hopefully learned better, then we're going to lose history. We're going to lose. I think I read once that it's really important in Germany. They spend a lot of time with their students studying the Holocaust because they recognize the value of their students understanding what happened so it won't happen again. And so I think if we just throw all of this stuff out because it wasn't perfect and because it had some really awful things in it, then it's likely to happen again.
And I appreciate that point, because we would argue that our particular methodologies and how we teach classical education, as students get older, they're being equipped to evaluate ideas and information for themselves. It's not at all an indoctrination of of ideals and specific values that are gonna.
In what way is a educational system that teaches you a whole system of being self-critical, which is what Western culture does. We're self-critical. And so, in a sense, even this criticism is within a Western cultural context, because it's criticizing our own culture. We do that all the time.
Sure.
We criticize ourselves. And that's one of the great things about Western civilization. And that's good.
Reflection.
And I was just reading yesterday a speech that Tracy Lee Simmons gave, and in it he talks about how history starts with facts and figures, right? Like, you can't argue with this thing happened at this time with this person, right? Like, that starts there. But and I forget the word he used, maybe knowledge is taking that stuff and thinking about it, right? Like, there is a model in education, even one that studies all of the classical era and all of the history we're talking about, but doesn't actually invite the students to think about it.
Examine
it and look at the causes, look at the consequences, evaluate it in the light of the principles that we espouse, right? But that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to give our students, when age appropriately, right, that they're really, and this is simplified and this is overly simplified, but they're learning the facts and figures in lower school. They start to think about it in middle school, and they're really struggling with it in high school, right? And that's oversimplified. They're learning facts and figures in high school too, but that's generally like the trajectory. And so we're not asking the third graders to evaluate, whether it was appropriate for Columbus to sail across the ocean, right?
That's right.
They learned that he did it, and the year and the people and the boat. Yeah,
that's right. But hopefully by the time they graduate, they have actually thought about that, and they've looked at the consequences of those actions, and not saying that and most of the time, if you evaluate anybody in history, you got to come down in a gray area.
That's
almost
right.
everybody.
You wouldn't have anything to read if you actually based your study and your reading on perfect people.
And that actually brings us to, Paul, you were kind of going here. I think that naturally brings us to, if someone chooses to move away from classical education because of its, whatever you want to say, the historical trappings, what replaces it? And does that alternative, is it guaranteed to avoid entanglements?
The alternative will be fully Western in some way. I mean, most of these efforts, I think, most of these critiques, it's like we want to take the one thing we like about Western civilization, because we're Westerners. That's the way we think. All the critiques really are now from inside the Western context now, because we're all Westerners.
If you're doing a classical education, I think it's really important that you also have to include your own country's heritage and culture. That is something you don't want to lose.
Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with that.
Well, you're saying it's gone.
I never said that.
No.
You said
I think
everything's Western.
Can I make a clarification here? I think what Martin's trying to say is that there are principles that the West has espoused practically the entire history of Western culture, that those principles have been, that may not have been present in other cultures, have at least been influential in some way on those cultures because of the past, particularly 500 years of conflict between West and East.
I mean, read Yoshiko Endo's Silence. I mean, it's in there. The Japanese are not wanting this culture. They want to keep it out. It's poison to them. And so these Christian missionaries coming in, which is the topic of Endo's book, they're not nice to them because they don't want this culture, and they know what's going to happen if they let them in, and that is in fact what happened.
Well, I think that's different from saying that the entire East has been Westernized. It sounds like they don't have a culture of their own.
That's not what that means, though. When I say that, that just means that that the kind of cultural situation that you see now today in modern Japan and in modern China has been extremely influenced by the West.
Influence
okay,
is a
so
different word.
glad we got that clarification. Let's go back to, I want to hit this point hard.
I do too.
If you are trying to classically educate your children and you are not in a, let's say, European dominated society where the culture, the books you're reading, the references that your children are going to need to know are not all European, like, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you extract the universal principles of classical education and still make sure that your children are fully enculturated in the culture that they're going to live?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a big question.
It is. And I wonder, I know that you counsel some families who have been even recently asking you about this. And I wonder if part of it is admitting that we are not part of that culture. And so we would then be limited in how we could advise a family. But what they can do is bring in the things that are significant to their faith, their heritage, their culture, the things that have been passed down, like preserved and studied and passed down.
But I think that doesn't mean that they also shouldn't be reading some of the ancient Roman and Greek philosophers and historians, because I do think when we say that what they were talking about was universal principles, they apply to everybody. But that's hard because for me, that application, that universal application means that everybody in my mind needs to figure out the purpose that God has for their lives. So I have to insert my Christianity into that as well. Why are we reading all of these things? Because we're trying to figure out how to be human. And for me, that would be within a Christian context. Now, can you figure out how to be human without God?
And that's what the Greeks and Romans were trying to do.
It is what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And so that also then makes it universal. But for me, it's hard for me to get beyond to get outside of the Christian context.
Well, and if we get kind of down a little bit to brass tacks here on like, how do you do this? Because I've thought about it a lot within the Western world, right? Like, because our curriculum is really driven for an Anglo. It's all in English, right? It's an Anglo
the language
perspective.
Is the first
right? It's Western,
hurdle.
But it's Anglo. And so, we don't have space in the curriculum for Don Quixote, right? But if you're a native Spanish speaker and you're Western, you may not read as much Dickens or Shakespeare, like both good things to read, even if you're not Anglo. But I guess I could just use the word English as opposed to Anglo, but but you should get Don Quixote in there. Right,
absolutely,
and I think that sort of
or the Count of Monte Cristo
if you're French,
because it's not just an East-West thing. Even when we talk about our curriculum being used in England, how much Laura Ingalls Wilder do British students need?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it really is. Part of it has to be cultural
and contextual to right. And our hope with the classical education is that students are trained to not just inherit the past uncritically, but they engage with it thoughtfully. That's our hope. As they leave for college or whatever path they're going to be on, that they're equipped with the tools to engage with, the very multifaceted past. And present, right?
And I find myself trying to do that same sort of evaluation on anything that's kind of thrown at me today, being like, you're trying to send this narrative my way. There's probably a bit of truth in that. There's probably a bit of falsity. How do I parse that out, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that goes for current stories, us trying to reevaluate the past, all of those things. And hopefully we're training our students to even do better than what I have, right? Because there's a lot of falsity to sift through these days.
There is so much. Just,
Mhm.
with social media, there is so much to read.
Mhm.
Yes. And to choose, well, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
we've got to do a good job of educating our children to be able to see through all of that.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's good to use my brain a lot to think through all of this. Yeah. Oh, and Marianne, we hope that it was helpful to you. Thank you for writing in. It was an honor to answer your question. Thank you. And anyone else with questions, you can reach us at podcast@memoriapress.com. Thanks so much. We'll be back next time.
Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.